Another senior detective sitting in on Oswald's high-level interrogations that weekend was Jim Lavelle.
Mr. Kelly with the Secret Service, who was the head of the Secret Service out of Washington, had flown in, and I guess it was the next day, perhaps on Saturday, asked him if he knew anybody named Alex Hydell. He answered no, and he asked him if he had ever used that name at any time, and he answered no. And he said, well, isn't it a fact that when you were arrested, you had an identification card with your picture on it and that name on it and your billfold? He said, I believe that is correct. And Mr. Kelly said, well, how do you explain that? And he said, I don't. During my tenure with him, he was a very calm and cool and collected individual. All of his answers were very concise and to the point. He didn't volunteer information, and he certainly didn't admit to anything. Mr. Kelly also, in the same time when he asked him about the Alex Hydell, he knew that Oswald had been involved in this fair play for Cuba in New Orleans. And he asked him, he said, now that the president has been killed, he says, do you think that the attitude of the United States towards Cuba will change? And Oswald looked around to his left where Captain Fritz was sitting, and he said, I believe that I am charged with the murder of the president. Is that correct? And Captain Fritz said, yes, that's true. And he turned back to Mr. Kelly and he said, I don't think that I should answer that, because whatever answer I give you might be construed in a different light than what I intended it to be. He said, however, in all countries, and this country is no exception, when a leader of the country he either dies or gets killed or something, there's always a second in command that takes over. And he said, in this case, I believe his name is Johnson, and I don't think that his views towards Cuba are any different than the president's.
An early arrival at police headquarters was the FBI agent in Dallas who'd been assigned to keep an eye on Oswald prior to the assassination, James Hosty.
His behavior when I talked to him on the afternoon of the assassination for approximately 1 hour was that of a person who was very calm, cool, and collected. He claimed that he was in the lunchroom at the time of the assassination by himself. He was also asked by Captain Fritz, did he bring a weapon into the building that day, and he said no, he had not, but he had seen the manager, Mr. Truly, had brought a rifle into the building a day or two before. This was later checked out and proved to be true, that Mr. Truly had brought a rifle in and he was going to go deer hunting with it and shown it to several of the people in the building. The interview was terminated because Oswald was taken out for a lineup.
Oswald was placed in 4 different lineups, 3 on Friday, a 4th on Saturday. In the first 2 lineups, Oswald appeared with 2 police detectives and a jail clerk. These men were wearing clothing quite a bit nicer than Oswald, but moreover, they did not resemble Oswald in appearance. They were heavier, older. One of them had blonde hair. The police gave fictitious names and occupations. Oswald gave his real name, his real occupation, to Texas School Book Depository. This information was being widely disseminated even by the time of the first lineup. In the second and third lineups, Oswald appeared with men who were quite a bit heavier, older. Some of them had blonde hair. And in the 4th lineup, which was the most outrageous of all, Oswald appeared in the lineup with 2 teenagers and a Mexican. And in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th lineups, Oswald complained bitterly to police about the manner in which the lineups were being conducted. And he berated the police, demanded legal representation, and it was very, very apparent to any witnesses that Oswald was the suspect. There are established criteria for the fair and proper conduct of police lineups. By any stretch of the imagination, every rule in the book was violated by the Dallas police in the conduct of each of the 4 lineups that weekend.
When they first filed against Oswald for killing President Kennedy, they put in the complaint that Oswald did kill President Kennedy in the furtherance of an international communist conspiracy. The White House called down to the district attorney and vehemently objected to that, in which then the district attorney removed this statement from the original complaint. Because of this, the White House was extremely upset with the local authorities, and we were under the strictest orders not to give them any information whatsoever at all about Oswald. This caused them to jump to the wrong conclusion and think that we were hiding something about ourselves when we were really cloaking the information about Oswald's Soviet and Cuban connections.
In Mexico City, 2 months before the assassination, a man claiming to be Oswald had visited both the Soviet and Cuban embassies, demanding a visa allowing him to travel to Russia via Cuba. He was unsuccessful. The American authorities were aware of this trip.
I asked him if he'd ever been to Mexico City, and he became quite upset about that, but this was more, he was more startled. And he said something to the effect, "How did you know about that?" And then wouldn't speak about it anymore.
Whether it was Oswald or an imposter in Mexico City, it was a connection that the American authorities were anxious to conceal at all costs. James Hosty gives the official explanation for this cover-up.
Oswald had been in contact with V.V. Kostikov, who was the Soviet KGB chief of assassinations and sabotage for the Western Hemisphere. I think the fact that Oswald had been in contact shortly before the assassination with a person of that nature, and due to the fact that he had spent 3 years in Russia, this would have caused the American public to become so outraged that it could have led to World War III. I believe for this reason they decided that they would keep this from the American public.
Whatever the real mission was in Mexico City, the American authorities at the highest level were determined that it should never be revealed.
In Mexico City, the CIA agents were instructed to cease and desist their investigation of a possible Castro connection to Oswald's assassinating of President Kennedy. There was a near mutiny among the CIA agents over this order to stop the investigation. The ambassador to Mexico City stated he was given orders from his superiors to stop the investigation, and then commented, well, if the president's own brother agreed with it, I guess we'd have to go along with it, which would indicate to me that Attorney General Robert Kennedy concurred with the order to stop the investigation of the Castro connection to Oswald.
In the holding cells of police headquarters in downtown Dallas, time was running out for Oswald. Throughout the relentless interrogations, he had offered no information other than vehemently protesting his innocence of the murders of both the president and Officer Tippit. 24 hours after his arrest, he was still without legal representation.
Oswald called me from the jail on Saturday after the assassination. He actually called twice. The first time in the afternoon, he just asked me to try to reach a lawyer that he was trying to get to represent him. And I said I would, because I thought he should have representation, but I frankly was stunned that he called, that he asked for something from me at that point. That was a very brief conversation, and his voice was very flat, detached, like as if there was no momentous event going on around him or around me. And then he called again in the evening to try to reach Marina, and just asked for Marina just as if it were any weeknight after work. He normally did call her then. Again, just very detached, very separated, it seemed to me, from what was going on.
For the rest of that day, and most of the following morning, Oswald's time was filled with more unrecorded interviews with police officials. Shortly after 11 o'clock on the Sunday morning, his move to the greater security of the Dallas County Jail began.
When we started to transfer him that morning, we brought his stuff down to him, and that included a couple of sweaters. I believe one was a beige and one was a black sweater. And it was a little cool, so we asked him if he wanted to wear one of the sweaters, and he said yes. And I asked him which one. He said, I believe I'll wear the
beige one. And he started to take it, and he said, no. But I think I want to wear the black one. I don't know why, because it wasn't the best sweater. But anyway, took the cuffs off of him and gave him the sweater, and he put it on and cuffed him again.
And in talking with Chief there, I suggested to him that morning that we take Oswald out of the elevator on the first floor, put him in a car on Main Street where there wasn't any people, and we could be into the county jail before anyone realized that we were transferring him.
But he did not agree to that because we were already obligated to transfer him so the press could take pictures and everybody else could see it. So, you know what happened. Ruby shot him and us holding him, so, which is not good.
Now the prisoner wearing a black sweater, he has changed from his T-shirt, is being moved out toward an armored car, being led out by Captain Fritz. There is the prisoner. Do you have anything to say in defense? Oswald has been shot. Oswald has been shot. Mass confusion here. Holy mackerel. A shot rang out as he was led into his car. The shot, there's a mass confusion there.
I had Oswald, in addition to being handcuffed to him, I had my left hand hooked into his belt on his right-hand side. And I pulled back with him, trying to pull him behind me. But without any leverage, I wasn't able to move him to any distance. What I succeeded in doing was turning his body a little bit. Ruby would have shot him if I had not turned him dead center just about where the navel is. As a result, by me pulling on him, trying to turn him in that reflex action, he shot him over here about 4 inches to the left of the navel. The bullet went all the way through him and lodged just under the skin on the right-hand side. If it had been a little better, a little higher caliber or more powder in the bullet, it would have gone on through him and hit me approximately in the same place. But it stopped just under the skin, and I could roll it around under the skin just like a seed in a grape.
I stood beside Dr. Shires and watched the efforts to salvage Mr. Oswald. I remember that he was given pure oxygen because he was already unconscious, and little or no anesthesia. And when the abdomen was opened, one could hear the blood escaping from the aorta. And he received 18 pints of blood within the next few minutes in an effort to resuscitate him. And he did recover a blood pressure for a moment or two and began to move his arms. You may recall that the bullet had entered his left chest, had gone through the stomach, the spleen, had torn the superior mesenteric artery on the aorta, gone through the vena cava, passed through the upper pole of the right kidney, buried itself through the liver and into the skin of the abdominal wall on the opposite side. And at that time, there were few, if any, survivors in America of a simultaneous injury to the aorta and vena cava, which was the major injury that Mr. Oswald sustained.
I was probably about 20 to 25 feet from the point of the shooting, and I was looking in that direction. And when the shot was fired, it didn't really sound like a pistol shot. It was a muffled sound, but I knew that it was a shot. And my first thought was that probably some older officer that was ready to retire, that was probably, I figured, bereaved and grieved over the shooting of Tippit, that really that's what my first thought was, that it was some policeman that shot him.